Welcome, folks, to another podcast on building high performance teams. Today, I am delighted to welcome Karen Egan, who is SVP for Global Support in VMware. Karen, lovely to have you on.
It's great to be here, Dara, and lovely to spend some time talking about this. So thanks for inviting me.
Excellent, excellent. So Karen, as I always do, I'm going to jump straight in and start asking you some questions. And I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you, you and I know each other probably a long way back in VMware, but I'd love for anyone who's watching this, if you could give us a little bit of information about kind of yourself, your career professionally, and anything you'd like to share about yourself personally as well, Karen, would be super.
Okay, great. So I suppose I've been in the IT stroke software industry for about 26 years now, right out of college. I actually started as a software developer back in the day and worked for a financial banking, doing home banking and telebanking. It was my first job. So working on things like tandems back in the day. Well, about 6, 7 years into my career, I was working at Motorola at the time. I actually went onto a customer site because they were struggling with the software I delivered out there, right, to understand what was going on. And I realized that my passion was actually working with customers, fixing their issues, and driving the product to be better for our customers. So when I came back from that trip, I actually consciously changed my career path in IT, and I moved from R&D into support. And that's where I spent the last 19 or so years, actually. So I love it. It's my passion. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is that on a personal level, I'm married with 2 boys. I met my husband when I was in college in UCC, and I love to travel with them, but that's been totally stifled for the last year, right? But my outlets are really cooking. That's my creative outlet. I get in the kitchen, never use the cookbook, figure out what I want to make so that the family never know what they're getting. And since I've been working from home, they're getting a surprise every day.
Excellent. Lucky them.
Yeah, and then it's really just about getting time for myself, making sure I stay healthy, get out walking, listening to music. So that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, I can feel your passion coming out about your love for what you do in support, and it's really lovely to hear. I guess it's a great thing to be. I guess if you love what you do at work, it kind of doesn't feel like work to a certain extent. Karen, you know, as before we came on, we just had a quick chat about you kind of started your career as a frontline manager with VMware, and now you're senior vice president for global support, which is, you know, a huge successful career behind you. Can you tell me a little bit about that and leadership as you've kind of grown through the years, and what leadership means to you today?
Great, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I suppose for me, when I look back, I'm at VMware nearly 14 years now, and I suppose when I started, it was coming in. It was the technology that excited me in the first place, because I am a techie at heart. But when I came in, to be building teams in a growing company with exciting technology really hit all my sweet spots, right? So I was really enthralled and excited about it. It was a lucky time for me because, as you know, VMware was growing crazy at the time, right, way back in 2007. So there was lots of opportunity. What I learned through my career was taking those opportunities and not being afraid to stretch yourself beyond. Yeah. Don't put yourself in a box that this is my job that I do here. So I'll give you an example. In my second week at VMware, the escalation manager moved back to the US, so we had nobody managing our customer escalations. At the time, I had 4 people in my team, and I was trying to hire out to 18. And I said, "Oh, I'll do that job as well." Knowing that I was going to be taking on this second role, like 2 day jobs, but it's that, I think that's what's important, right? That you use the opportunities. Now, when it comes to leadership, I think for me, what I've learned throughout my career is that there's just some key tenets for me that I need to make sure that I'm delivering on. And I suppose a bit of this is a combination of humility and confidence. So as a woman in IT, what I've learned through the years, like when I was first promoted to VP, I looked myself in the mirror and said, how is somebody like you from a small town in Dungarvan become VP of a global company? And then I realized, you know what? I'm capable, I can do it, I'm good at my job. So that confidence in yourself that you know what you're doing, but marrying that with a humility that you're not going to be the smartest person at everything. And you want to hear the ideas from everybody else and make the right decision. So I think that combination is really important. But then you have to class that with how you're communicating. And I mean that not just by talking, the listening and the active listening to not just my direct reports, but the whole organization. That's where the ideas and the innovation come from. And if you're setting the strategy and giving people the empowerment to go innovate, to develop, you're going to get the best ideas. And as long as everybody knows what the North Star vision is, right? And that's my job as we run global support. How are we transforming for the new world VMware is in? We're moving to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, where we're supporting our largest enterprises running across on-prem and cloud infrastructure with our own offerings, with third-party partners. So how does support come together in that SaaS mindset to deliver that? So as everybody thinks about that North Star vision and everybody's aligned on where we're going and what benefits that's going to bring for the customers and for VMware, it's then empowering the team below you to have that agility to go drive and deliver. And the other thing I would say is that for me, building that trust and being authentic. So I hope my team know that I would never ask anybody to do anything I would not do myself. And I still get down and in the weeds when it's needed. So if we've got a customer out there that needs us and my team need me, I'm always ready to jump in and to help, but not get in their way. So getting that balancing act right of when you step back and empower people to do it versus when you really do need to jump in and help the team.
Wow, that's really cool. And you know, I know a lot of what you're talking about there about being able to make those judgment calls. Like it comes from years of experience. It's not something you can like read out of
Oh
a
my
book or
God,
learn in a class.
trust me, Dara, I'll tell you, right, that as I talk about this, I'm still not perfect at it. And something for me, every leader has to be continually open and learning as well, right? And where I came from 14 or 18 years ago in my career to where I am now, I was a very deep personality. I know my base instinct is to know the right answer and to go with it. And it's learning how to get that balance, right? And I've had to do things myself, like in team meetings, in my own team meetings, I'm going to speak last. Because if I speak first, I'm going to come up with the answer rather than hearing everybody else. And if you hear everybody else, some of the ideas that come out just actually flip your brain and go, wow, I never thought about it like that, right? And so it takes time and it takes active work to do it, but it is so worth it. And the other thing I found early in my career was, if I do it myself, I'll get it done faster, right? But that's not what it's about. It's about empowering everybody else, because just because somebody else does it in a different way or needs your support to get it done, you have to build up the team and make the team successful. And I love the quote from Simon Sinek that says, "Leaders eat last." And it's really all about making sure your team has what they need to do their job, and that they're successful, because that's what makes you successful at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, that makes. I love that Simon Sinek quote. Leaders eat last. I'm going to have to remember that one. You know, Karen, you touched on it there around kind of the learning process for leadership. And one of the questions I've asked people is around where they see the balance between nature versus nurture, you know, born leaders versus people that learn as they go. What are your views on that? What's your experience been?
I suppose I think it's a combination of both, and everybody can learn, right?
Yeah,
So for me, there is always the capability to nurture, but there's what people's actual what they want to do. Do they where they want to go in their career as well? So for me, it's always about sitting down and understanding yourself, so that self-introspection that I talked about, understanding where you want to go and your capabilities, and playing to your strengths, Sarah. So for
yeah,
me, you can always focus on the negatives and say, "Oh, I'm not good at this," but understanding what those areas you have to develop and continuing developing them. So for me, definitely nurture has played a key part, because as I said, way back in the day, I was that personality, dominant, gung ho. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it like this. But you can't railroad over people, right? And you have to
yeah,
build and learn over time. So I think, yeah, people will have natural leadership capabilities, but can they play to their strengths and build more? I absolutely believe you can nurture and build it and be successful through
yeah,
that constant development and learning.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense, and it's actually coming out strong in how you're describing your own experience as well, getting to where you are today. For you, Karen, in terms of leadership again and planning versus intuition, um, where would you fall on that? What are your views on that thought?
Yeah, so the intuition plays a big part for me, because I will have a gut feeling and say, look, I think this is the right way to go. But I am logical, so I do like to back that up with data. So and learning from the industry as well. As I talked about, we're going through this transformation right now, right? I
Yeah,
don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I do like to look at what's going on across the industry, what's going on within our own organization, getting that feedback and data. But for me, it's not about analysis paralysis. We have to be agile. I
yeah,
would rather that we make the decision and are 80% right. And if we
yeah,
fail, we fail fast. So we innovate, right? So I'll always start with an intuition, but I won't just go ahead gung ho. I will have some analysis to back it up. So it's the balance, right? Because
yeah,
I want us to be agile. I want us to be innovative. I want us to be fast. And if we've got just enough data to make the right decision and get
yeah,
it right 80% of the time. And if we fail, we analyze it, we fail fast, and we move on, and we course correct, and we keep going. So that's really the philosophy for me about how to make sure we're getting things done in a timely manner, making the impact on the business. And
yeah,
now it's a different conversation if you're failing every time. Then
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
you're not doing enough of that planning and investigation. So definitely a balance for me.
I love that, and I love that a real like innovation mindset is what jumps to mind to me when I'm talking to you about this, Karen. Um, Karen, you know, you mentioned that you started off with a team of just 4 people, which is, it's a relatively small team, and now you're SVP for a large global organization looking after their support function. Like, I actually don't know how many people that is. I'm somewhere in the thousands, I'm guessing. So gone
Yeah,
from
it's about
really
it's about 2,500 people today. Yeah.
2,500, which is an enormous team by any standards. And I guess I'd love to know about what you look for, what you think are the kind of um, key areas for high performance. What are the things you need to have in the team? What are the things you look for to get that high performance within those teams?
So I'll start with what's really basic for me, and that's trust and respect, right, for each other, whether it's in my leadership team, whether it's down to the individual teams and individual engineers that are really doing the work every day, right? So
Yeah.
that's super important to start with. Well, with that comes speed. It really does, and Covey has a whole course on this, the speed of trust, which I did with my leadership team years ago. But what I love about that is if you have that trust and respect, making the business decisions is a lot faster, because you can clearly call out and articulate with each other what's going on. And then that brings the accountability. We hold each other accountable as a team, while still empowering the team that I talked about earlier, right? So all of those things. But what I love to wrap around that is, and especially in my direct leadership team, I try to make sure we've got a bit of humor and fun as well. When
Yeah.
people jump onto my team meetings, the first 5 minutes is always us having a little bit of fun and humor.
Yeah.
Because that's so important that you relate to people personally. You spend so much of your life at work. We have to have that sense of drive, but also the sense of fun. So those things
Yeah.
are really important to me. But I think my job then is to make sure that I'm communicating the vision, and people are understanding how that relates back to their day-to-day job and the organization's goals, right? So
Yeah.
that there is a tie to what I do every day really impacts VMware as a business,
Yeah.
and we're driving to meet VMware's goals. So if you've got that clearly laid out, people understand what I expect from them in their roles, so the roles and responsibility, and but that we're also um, celebrating then the successes people have, right? So
Yeah.
that we are calling it out and celebrating. And then, as I talked about earlier, that continuous listening, and it gets harder and harder when you have a larger organization. So for me as well, it's about, am I displaying that inclusive leadership that my leaders are then taking down within their organization, and that
Yeah.
it's permeating through the whole organization, because that's what's important, right? And I do try and get together with our teams, do skip level conversations, look at what we need to change. But it is that for me a combination of all of those things. If a team knows what their purpose and direction is, if they understand how that relates back to the business's goals, and if they have the clear roles, responsibilities, and accountability to be able to go deliver on that, that's when
Yeah.
the team will perform well. They'll hold each other accountable for delivering on it, and
Yeah.
and and they'll be passionate about it. If I'm passionate about what we're doing and why we're doing it, my leadership are passionate, then
Yeah.
that's going to go down through the organization as well, Dara.
Yeah, yeah, that's got you've said a number of things there that really resonated with me. Just the last thing you mentioned about how kind of you approach things permeates down through the organization. I've read bits and pieces about how leaders, their attitude and the way they approach things, it impacts on everybody that they're working with. And I'm definitely going to check out that speed of trust piece that you mentioned there. I think that might be the first time I've heard it, and I'd love to learn, or maybe I've heard it before, but I certainly would like to learn more about it. Karen, what have you found has been, what are the biggest challenges you find with, building that high performance, with getting that high performance ethic within the team?
I think for me the challenge is with such a large organization. Number one, it is exactly what you said, that culture, right? How am I making sure that culture is permeating right down through the organization? Everybody understands that. And I suppose when I took over the global support role last November, I started as well, because we're all in remote working, right? I started as well to think about how are we actually communicating. So I've done a few things, as well as my direct leadership team. I now meet with the extended leadership, so their leaders every 2 weeks. So we talk through priorities, understanding what issues the team is having, then setting up monthly meetings with all the managers in the organization so that they understand the priorities, the decisions that we're making, and how we take those back to our teams, right? And build that culture. The other thing I would say is the empowerment, right? And the innovation. How do we build that into a busy workday, work life? People all have their day jobs. So and not get paralyzed, because especially in support, it's about numbers and metrics and the number of cases you're dealing with, the number of customer issues. So how do we not get paralyzed by those numbers and metrics, but use them as a guiding tool to understand how we change the business? And finally, I would say it's just continuing to manage the balance of the work and the priorities and the deadlines, because there's always too much to do, right? And so if you can get that balance right, and your leaders can get that right down throughout the organization, it really helps the team to self-manage, that they really want to do what's best. But the culture comes first for me, the culture and the listening. If you get that right, if you're putting employees and your teams as the number one priority in the organization. So we're a support organization, right? Customers are everything we do, but actually our people are the top priority, because if our people are happy in the job that they do, we work in a good culture, they feel included and understand the roles they're doing, the customers are going to be looked after. There's no two ways about it. It'll just happen, right? Because everything starts with our people on the ground who do the work with the customers every day.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it feeds back into the building that environment of trust. And you mentioned a couple of items there, which made me think again about being very clear on what your North Star is and what the objectives are, to help, I guess, prioritize those key items. And what really struck me about what you said is the challenges around effective communication, especially for an organization so large, ensuring that same message is going right down throughout the team, and everyone's clear on it. That's really cool stuff. Karen, we touched on, or you mentioned kind of remote work. Have you seen are the fundamentals of leadership changing, or have there been changes you've had to make in this kind of new environment, this new era?
I think we've all had to make changes, right? And I would say for my own type, for how I work myself, as well as for how I'm working with the team, right? So first thing I would say is being in my front room, which I've turned into my office, as you can see here, being in here, it became very easy that you could be sitting at the desk for 12 or 14 hours a day and not realizing it, right? So I've had to make some conscious decisions in my own life of getting up, going. I've even started to do things now, like where I'll take a call on the phone and go for a walk, And just those types of things. So my own work habits have definitely had to change, and that's conscious decisions.
Right.
Then for working with the team, so I suppose a couple of things. I've been managing remote leaders and remote teams from me, not necessarily remote from the office, but remote from me from several years now. So things that I would always very consciously do is making sure that we're staying in touch in a structured way, so that you have set up times to meet everybody individually. You're making the time for everybody. Then that you're driving collaboration across the team. So what tools you're using to collaborate and to make sure it's as easy as possible for people to ideate and actually work together. So I think that's important. Then me leading by that example of trying to be flexible in my working, encouraging everybody to do that, because it's difficult when you're sitting at home by yourself, and we're all social animals, right? And so it's encouraging that down through the team as well. That's really important, but also providing and getting opportunities to do social interactions, right? You know, so that the teams are still doing team events, or you have a drop-in coffee morning, or do these things virtually, so that people still feel connected on a social level, and also getting feedback about those communications mechanisms, meetings from your teams. So like going out to them, like we, for example, we're a large organization, and every team does a morning huddle, right, for 15 minutes with their manager, their tech leaders, to talk about the day ahead and the day that's just passed. But in that, into those huddle packs, we send out to managers once every week or once every 2 weeks key items that we think it would be good for all the teams to hear. So it's getting that constant communication and feedback on, is this method of communication working for you guys? Are the meetings working? Are the collaboration tools working? And making adjustments and changing, because for me it is difficult. Everybody moving remote is not the easiest thing to do. Now we're lucky at VMware, because some of our own software that we develop and deliver to customers is virtual desktops and allows us to work from anywhere, right? And so we were all set up for work from anywhere as soon as we had to do this last February, March. But then it becomes all the other tools around that. So while we have the secure workforce digital strategy in place, what other tools do we need to collaborate? How are we creating the human interactions? And you know, quite honestly, sometimes I say to people in one-to-ones or in team meetings, it's okay if you don't want to turn on your video this morning, because you're zoomed out of it. You're exhausted from being on video day to day, and we just take it as it comes, you know.
That's the communication element is coming out really strongly there. It's almost you need to. I don't want to use the term over communicate, but you need to communicate kind of to the level where everyone's feeling included and everyone's staying together, without kind of pushing it to the point, as you said, like I've heard so many people talk about Zoom fatigue, you know, from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I guess you've touched on some of the kind of the tools that you're using as well to facilitate those that remote work era. Are there like a top 2 or 3 tools that you kind of feel are must-haves to make it work? You mentioned the remote desktop piece.
Yeah, so like we've got, I suppose we have, from a digital workforce perspective, you need to have a strategy, right? What is your digital strategy for the future of work? Because it's going to change from here on in. We're going to have hybrid and flexible working, and remote working as well opens up opportunities for how much talent you can source, right? So there's a lot of benefits to it, but in doing that, you have to have a strategy on what your digital looks like. So for us, as I said, we already had the the workspace one type of environment where all our apps are secure. You can run them from any desktop. So a lot of that was already in place. But then as we started to look at specifically for our teams, how were we going to collaborate and work together? So for example, in January, we did a major reorg, and after I took over the team, and about a third of the organization moved into new teams, change managers and all that kind of stuff. So when you're doing stuff like that, we were going through a major planning session and setting our goals for next year and how we were going to accomplish this. But we used a tool called Miro, which is great,
Miro.
right? And Miro is like, you can actually whiteboard virtually. So everybody was able to come in like we were in a room, put your sticky boards, your sticky pads up onto the Miro board with your ideas. Then, and we could all do it at the same time. You can all edit it at the same time and see each other moving around and writing comments and stuff like that. So while it took longer and it took more effort than being in a room together, it was absolutely possible to do that innovation brainstorming, come out with our goal strategy and how we were going to go through this restructure while continuing to deliver on the transformation. So for me, something like that is key. Then things like just teaming. So Slack, we use an awful lot. Our engineers really like that. So it helps us to connect with R&D. It has the history inside in it of the chat, so you can see previous answers in there. And then when you think about it from a global organization perspective, that actually opens up the possibilities that not just the team who were sitting in the office together previously in Cork or in America or in Bangalore, but now the whole globe is communicating together. So the knowledge share actually increases exponentially. And then it is important to have meeting tools like Zoom and stuff like that to make sure that you are getting face-to-face time with people. But for me, the collaboration tools, the channels that we're using to actually discuss are extremely important, as well as the workforce strategy.
That's really cool, and I love that. I love that whiteboarding capability. I'm not familiar enough with Miro. I've heard a couple of people mention it. I have to check it out. And I love those kind of stop, start, continue brainstorming sessions. I think they're a wonderful experience. They're also kind of a team building experience as well as a great idea generator. Do you know, you mentioned something there as well, Karen, that you're only the second person to mention it to me, and the other person I was speaking with phrased it slightly differently. They were talking about because of the remote work, it's almost leveled things a little bit insofar as people who are sitting in the kind of headquartered office who might have had a bigger say in the past, it's now more evenly distributed all over the world, even where you've got even hot desks, you know, those people have kind of an equal impact on anything that you're doing from a team perspective, which is, I just found it really interesting that there's probably so much I think we can learn from what we've had to go through that we should maintain, and we should apply it as we go forward, because it's a positive learning.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, it really does set that level playing field. The collaboration, the ideas expand out beyond an individual office, and exactly like that, the halls of power in headquarters are not necessarily what they were before, right?
Yeah.
So it is that real connection, and we need to keep that. So we're thinking about what happens as we get through the summer this year and what the future looks like right now. And one of the interesting things and concepts we talked about is that, look, if we're going to have flexible working and remote working and all of this, when does a meeting become an in-person versus virtual? So if one person is not in the office, should it be virtual? If two people are not there out of 10? So we're grappling with this as well, because what we found is that, and you'd have known this yourself from previous, if you ever weren't in the in-person meeting and you were the only person dialing in, it was impossible to follow it, right? Whereas when everybody is on the same medium, you actually get that level playing field. So we're thinking about through things like that as well. How will we set ourselves up for the future to take some of what we've had to learn during COVID and now expand it out into our normal working practices?
Yeah, yeah, I love your mention about when people were dialing in the past, and I kind of almost forgot about it. I remember one time when we had started eating, however it happened, we had started eating lunch, pizza or something, and we heard a voice on the phone saying, "Are you guys having lunch?" And we're kind of going, oh, there's such a disconnect there. It's incredible, but
Yeah.
Karen, the last thing I'd like to ask you, and it's a question I've asked of all leaders that I've met, is, what kind of hints and tips do you have? Like, what do you do to bring the best version of yourself to work every day? I mean, at kind of at a senior level that you're at, and the impact that, how you come across and your mood and your attitude and everything, how that permeates right down through the organization. Leaders, that they're almost not allowed to have an off day, which is almost an impossible human request, almost, I would say. But what sort of hints and tips, or what do you do to kind of, be on fire every day?
I think first of all, for me, it's that looking after yourself, right? And I touched on it a little bit earlier. I found when I moved into this remote working last March, I wasn't getting up from the desk. So now I've changed that, and I consciously block time in my calendar. That is time where I'm going to go for lunch or going to go for a walk. I'm running a global team, so you've got teams that I'm connecting with in Asia, and then you've got US, where my boss works, where a lot of the teams work. So it's very heavy and centric in US time zone, and then you've got Europe in the middle, right? So what I do is I look at times during the day where things are not so busy. Maybe it's around 12 o'clock. So I've
Yeah,
done the morning with Asia. I've had time with Europe before the US really wakes up, and take an hour or two to myself, be that for exercise, lunch, all of that kind of stuff. And the same in the evenings. And I've become pretty religious in the evenings about, I'm going to take an hour to sit with my family. Well, the four of us are all here in the house together, right? But I'm going to take an hour to sit with them and have dinner together. It's the
yeah,
least I can do. So that puts me in the right mindset. Number one, for myself, that I'm getting time for myself. I'm exercising. I'm healthy.
yeah,
The other thing then I would say is being having that passion for what you do is so important, because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then you can't fake it, right? As you said,
yeah,
it's just near impossible. So while every day may not be perfect and you may be down, if you can think about, this is why I'm doing it. This is why I love doing it. That really helps me, right? It motivates me personally when I think about those things.
yeah,
And then the third thing I would say is structure thinking time for yourself as a leader. I've started to pilot some tools with our IT team now, like my analytics, where it's actually looking at my Outlook and it's telling me, you have no time for yourself in the
wow.
next 2 days and stuff like that, right? So
Mm,
that's good reminders as well, right? So I think for me, it's that combination. Like, you do need thinking time, because how are you supposed to drive the strategy for an organization, make sure that you're staying on the right path if you're not setting that time to reflect on how things are going, what we need to do next, and how we need to pivot, right? So I
yeah,
try and do that on either on both, at most times, a Monday and a Friday morning. So take an hour, reflect on the week before, what we need to do this week. Take an hour and a half, 2 hours on a Friday to think about the strategy side of things. So that really helps as well.
very good, very good. They're great tips, and I'm a huge believer in, taking exercise and kind of taking care of yourself physically, which also has such a massive effect in your sense of well-being. and mental fitness. Karen, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I've absolutely loved this, and I've got so much out of it. And I'm sure anyone else who look at this, no matter whether they're just starting off in their career or with years of experience, will have plenty to learn from all the good stuff you've given there. So I guess I just like to say thank you so much for joining me and sharing your thoughts and ideas on kind of leadership and team performance. It's been super.
You're welcome, Dara. I enjoyed every minute of it, and thanks for inviting me along.